national podcast as well.
Awesome.
And here's Arrow.
Oh.
Good morning.
Hi, Arrow.
How are you guys
Hi,
doing
Arrow.
today? Oh, my goodness sakes. Listen to all that energy this morning.
We are totally pumped.
Yes, we are here and we're loving it.
Well, you have every reason in the world to be totally pumped up, because what I love about this book, JFK Jr., An Intimate Oral Biography, is the fact that we cannot forget about the past. In order for this moment of now to happen, things happened before we got here. And I'm so glad that you had the confidence and the courage to say, hey, look, we can't leave this out.
Thank you so much. That's lovely. Thank you. Yeah, we really wanted to paint a human portrait of John and also, make sure that he wasn't forgotten. That was the most important thing.
It's really interesting when you say you wanted to do a human portrait. I mean, I'm one of those guilty ones. The National Enquirer, People Magazine, and to hold this book and to read this book, it's like, okay, they're setting me straight.
That's great to hear. The form of the book is an oral biography, so it's all the many different people that John met throughout his life, over 200 people, and woven together almost as if they're having a conversation about John.
He comes across inside the book as just being somebody that is everyday, but yet so many people called him the Prince. He was our Prince in America.
Yeah, I think he had he just handled his fame and his family name and his connection to American history with such grace. And I think that was the thing that set him apart.
One of the things I'll never forget, and I think this is because this is how JFK Jr. got into our hearts, is that I know where I was when news came that something wasn't right. And I know what I did. I have this beautiful painting in my house of a sunset. And every time I look at it, I think of this guy that was such a huge part of my life. But I didn't get to know him. I don't know. I didn't know who he was, but yet he was so big in our life.
Yeah, there was an emotional connection to John from, I would argue, from the time he was born. And I think that America sort of embraced him and was watching him and was watching out for him in some ways because he lost his father so young. And he was, he was just this person that people were hopeful about. He inspired hope.
Absolutely. And there was just this connection to him. And I think that's what we discovered over and over again, through our book, that whether you met him or not, we felt connected.
Speaking of connected, the audio version of this book, the way that you have interweaved so many different voices in this, and Rosemarie, you're part of this. I mean, you talk about a connection. It's when I'm driving in the car, it's almost like, oh my God, I'm right here with these thoughts.
Oh, that's great. That's excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I think that was really the only way to do this book, to sort of have it seem like people throughout his life got together in a room and were just sharing memories.
How did it come to you? Because I mean, something like this is so heavy, and you're always asking that question of, does anybody really want this? Because marketing is marketing.
Yeah, I think what it was that enough time had passed.
25 years.
That people felt like they were celebrating him rather than mourning him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and right, we didn't want him to be forgotten. And it was amazing, as we spoke to people, more memories would come forth. And then sometimes that would give you an idea of what to ask the next person.
Or who else to interview, or who else to reach out to.
Mm-hmm.
See, and that's going to be very interesting, because once people listen to this in Audible, or if they even pick up this book and they read it, they're going to ask questions as well. So I would love to hear what real people who experienced his life through the pages of stories are going to be affected by this book. I want to hear their stories as well.
That reminds me, somebody just said to us off the cuff, John's favorite restaurant was El Teddy's. So then Rose and I are like, we got to find a waitress from El Teddy's who waited on John. And we found his favorite waitress.
His favorite hostess at El Teddy's, and we interviewed her.
Yes. Oh my God! So let's be honest here, okay? I mean, when he fell in love, did for so many women, John was their fantasy. I mean, it was like, okay, now do we step back and watch him fall in love, or was like, no, this is going to be like a daytime soap. No, he can't have her.
Oh, I loved watching him fall. I mean, we loved it. These beautiful couples. And I mean, I think I wanted John to be in love. Like, what a beautiful love stories.
Yeah.
I think it was twofold for the rest of the country and the rest of the world. They wanted him to be in love, but as long as it was with them.
And the fashion show. How many lives changed because of that couple?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's Carolyn. That's all Carolyn. I mean, she changed his entire look.
I mean, like, even when I look at photos of them now, I'm like, nobody looked like them. I mean, yes, they were, of course, incredibly genetically blessed, but like, they were just like a certain coolness and nonchalance about them.
What did you learn from everybody sharing their stories? Because you got to listen to their pitch, volume, and tone. And that means so much to me because I'm an emotional person. I want to hear people speak.
I mean, I guess what I would say, like, every once in a while there would be a certain phrase that would sort of ring in our heads. And I remember when I spoke to a man in India that John had lived with for 3 weeks, he called him a wounded seeker of truth. And I just thought, oh, how interesting, right? Like, there's sort of this trauma that he's sort of lives with his entire life, and yet he's a seeker and he's seeking. So there were certain phrases like that that sort of rang true for us.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I found that I sort of knew these people, but when we put the whole thing together, it was like, wow, he really had friends that he kept all the way from grade school throughout his entire life. And not just like a friend on Facebook. Like, they talked, they got together, they saw each other. The people in his life, they really stayed with him, and he stayed with them. And there's a story in the book about a friend of his when he was People Magazine, Sexiest Man Alive. Yep. And she said, we're never going to see you anymore. You're going to make all these new friends, and you're going to be, now you're really famous. And he said, Sasha, I don't make new friends.
There's such a myth about him in the way that Lynyrd Skynyrd was always about a myth, and so was Led Zeppelin. I always thought of him as being a rock star because you could take 10 people who had their own personal experiences about JFK Jr., and we would all have different stories.
And I think that's exactly what makes the book so rich and so interesting, is that the different stories from different people, all walks of life, and all phases of his life, from grade school to high school, collegiate, George, the DA's office. Yep. It's really, I think it's a really rich portrait.
Rosemarie, you worked with him. Was he that humble? Because in my heart, I believe he was more than humble, that he was down to earth every day. I'm just this guy who happens to be in this moment.
He absolutely was. And you know what was interesting about that is he reminded other people of the same. Good. He used to always say, nothing is as good or as bad as it seems in the moment. So he had this sort of tempered way of dealing with things. But I think that, that was what was so unique about him. That was what was so unique about his celebrity. And in the book, we talk to Garth Brooks, and he says, he wore his life right in front of you. Yep.
Wow. 10 minutes with you is not enough. But I tell you what, I've got your book and I've got Audible. And that right there is just going to continue to inspire and influence so many of us because we get to know now. We get to know the truth. I can't thank you enough for this book.
Thank you,
Arrow. It was a pleasure talking to you. Yeah. What a great chat. Thank you.
You be brilliant today, okay?
All right.
You too.
Bye, Arrow.
Later, Arrow.
Hello,
good morning, Shaman.
Hey, how are you guys doing today?
Hey, listen, it's a lot cooler up here, so I'm happy and content. And I'm getting some really great knowledge from this gentleman right here, which I have a list for John Weber to make me copies of these movies. Have fun with him. He's all yours, hard out at 20.
Ed, what an amazing book. Everybody who thinks they know everything about Hollywood needs to read this book. They don't know what really goes on here.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you very much.
How did you trip across this? I mean, this is so original.
Well, it started when I was in college. I was watching the Hannibal movies, and I don't remember why, but I was just kind of going through them, and that included two different versions of Red Dragon, the one that Michael Mann made in the 80s called Manhunter, and then the film Red Dragon from the 2000s. And I was just curious if there were any other remakes that I had somehow not been aware of. So I went to IMDb and started browsing around and discovered an Indian movie called Sangharsh, which was a remake of Silence of the Lambs. And when I say India, I mean Bollywood. And when I say Bollywood, I mean singing and dancing. And you have not lived until you've seen Hannibal Lecter sing and dance in a Zorro costume.
Wow. For listeners.
So, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, for listeners, the book we're talking about is How the World Remade Hollywood, which is just unbelievable in the way, like you're talking about this Bollywood moment.
Yes. And from there, I thought, well, gosh, there's got to be other unauthorized remakes of Hollywood films, right? Like, what else is out there? And very quickly, I came across the infamous Turkish Star Wars, which steals footage from Star Wars and is this hodgepodge of Flash Gordon and all kinds of other things. And that blew my mind. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed.
But I got to ask you a question, though, because we all live in this world of Disney, and they're quick to take you down if you have anything Disney on your websites, especially music. But how are they getting away with taking scenes from Star Wars without breaking that copyright law?
Well, there's a few reasons. One, we're talking about a pre-internet era. And so the thing is that, like, these companies, these studios would have needed to know that these movies existed. And they probably did not, at least not at the time, because many of these films were not released internationally. Many of them were screened almost exclusively in their home countries or in sort of the diaspora. In Turkey, you get some folks that have moved to Germany or so forth. But so, they had to kind of know that it was there. Even if they did, though, it would have to be worth their while to sue. And in many cases, you're talking about films that were made with almost no budget. The companies that made them didn't have money, or at least not much money. Right. And in some cases, these were films that were only released in their home country and tanked. So there were just not very deep pockets. But also, the thing about some of these Turkish films is that copyright laws were different in Turkey at that time. There were very strict rules about copyright for domestic artistic products, but very loose copyright restrictions when it came to international products. So it kind of wasn't a big deal for them to rip off an existing film.
The way you described that about how the quality really wasn't there, all of a sudden I start thinking about TikTok and the way that, to me, the greatest next producers and directors are on TikTok right now learning how to do it. We're all reenacting these movies. I mean, is it one and the same?
It's not probably exactly like that, but you could probably find some similarities. I mean, I think one of the most fascinating examples is Nigeria, and there's a Nigerian version of Titanic, which is not very good, but it's interesting to watch, and it was also done with no money. But Nigeria in particular has been a really fascinating case because they didn't really have a classic film industry because it was too expensive to do. But in the 1980s, video cameras became more available and affordable. And so you'd have these filmmakers, some amateurs, some from television, who would start making these super low budget video films that were released on the market that sort of told specifically Nigerian stories that became super popular. And then over the period of, a few decades, went from basically no budget VHS films to really glossy Netflix films.
Which was a shock. It had to have been a shock.
Yeah, it's wild. Like I've you don't really get many cases of that level of progression so quickly because they were kind of basically running through the whole sort of I want to say history, but like learning production that quickly.
Yeah.
For an entire industry.
You just gave me one of the biggest flashbacks of my life when you talked about that sudden change, because when I was a kid and all of a sudden we had this new thing called cable TV, all these movies that I didn't know existed were there. That was such a culture shock. So they went through a culture shock as well.
Sure, yeah.
Oh my God. You settled on 65 global interpretations of iconic films. That in my heart says there's going to be more books because you love digging in on these stories.
I do, and actually, you get 10 bonus ones in the book because it's 65 65 films that get remade. But there's a few versions of Superman, a few versions of Star Wars, and so you actually end up with 75 films in there.
So now we talk about movies, but a lot of these movies, they come with music as well. Did they have their own interpretation of the music? I know we talked about, the music in the movies in India, but what about other movies such as the Titanic? I mean, that movie, the soundtrack was just unstoppable.
Yeah, well, funny you should mention that because, that one uses an almost interminable loop of My Heart Will Go On, really? Including a Hausa language version of My Heart Will Go On. You get a lot of Turkish films where they just didn't have the time or money. They were churning these films out and they just didn't have the time or money to create new soundtracks. And so, they are lifting soundtracks from either the American versions of those films or just other records that they happen to have. So you get a version of The Exorcist that uses music from The Exorcist. You get Turkish Batman, which uses music from basically every 60s spy film that was ever made. So you do get the whole range. You get some with original music and then some with like, hey, I know what that is. That's from Rambo.
Yes. In the next couple of weeks, we're gonna be seeing Deadpool and Wolverine. But I tell you, I laughed like a kid when I found out that in Turkey, they had one that was based on Captain America and Spider-Man. I want to see that.
It is so wild. It is Captain America and Mexican wrestler El Santo versus an evil Spider-Man that can spontaneously clone himself.
Do you treat these as B-rated movies? Because, I love B movies, but only because I love to watch really bad made movies.
Well, so I treat them as entertainment. These are crowd pleaser movies, almost all of them. And I am a crowd and I am pleased by them. But really the sort of purpose of this book is to kind of tell the stories behind them, because you watch a movie like, Turkish Captain America and El Santo versus evil Spider-Man, and you wonder, where did this come from? Why was this made? How was this made? And the book tells those stories.
See, I'm just so fascinated with your passion for this because, we all have our own interests and we all really dig in when it comes to content. But you take us into an area of the world we're not used to, Ed. Because I guess we're so Americanized.
That's part of it. And I think the way that we tend to have consumed these movies is in cherry-picked clips that are on YouTube. And so a lot of people have seen a clip of what is purported to be the Indian Superman or the Turkish Rambo or Bollywood Harry Potter or something, and they're only seeing a couple of minutes, and the comments are usually a whole bunch of snark and a lot of sort of ignorance about what these things are, and I think it's so much more fun if you understand where they came from. It's a much richer experience if you kind of know, hey, what is the deal with these films?
Wow. What's really interesting is that I've come across some of these clips, but I always just thought it was just people just screwing around. But now that because of this book, it's really opened up my mind in the way of saying, no, these are full featured movies. I thought it was very interesting to see the remake of Star Trek. It was like, what the hell is this? And then all of a sudden you're going, wow, this is a real movie.
Mm-hmm. It was in Turkey. It was actually the first ever Star Trek motion picture, but it's based primarily on the Man Trap, the first episode of the show. But the cool thing is that while the original Star Trek series was all filmed in these little small sets built on sound stages, there weren't sound stages in Turkey, and so they would have to film on location. And so you get them filming all of the cool planet scenes in Ephesus. Wow. Which is the site of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And so you get this incredible production value that you never could have seen on actual Star Trek, even though, the filmmaking is pretty rough because the resources are so limited.
This book, it really would be that one class that I would take at a community college. I would invest in going to a class to hear you open our minds and imaginations to this, because to me, this is a step in the direction of making greater, better pictures.
It is just so much fun. And I think part of the thing that I find unfortunate is that I worry that the title of the book ended up sounding too scholarly, and it's not a scholarly book. It's designed for anybody who enjoys movies. And I did a talk once at Wizard World a number of years ago, and it was the first night of the convention, and not a lot of people were there yet. And I talked to the guy who was hosting. I did a panel on international remakes and ripoffs of superheroes, and he was like, don't worry if not a lot of people come. The room ended up being packed, and it was not to see me. Like, obviously, like, they were there to see like the clips and stuff, and people loved it. And that's the thing, is that I think there's so much that people can enjoy from these films, whether it's to see the silliness of what does Turkish Superman look like, to then learn, well, why did this happen?
See, and right away, I'm taken back to how I watch my Netflix and I watch my Hulu and anything else that's on that flat screen, in the way that I love watching these foreign films, because they have a different way of sharing stories, which inspires me as a creative person. And to me, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm drawn to this book, is because it's so unique in the way of saying, hey, think of it this way and not the way that you think you know.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent way to look at it, and it is very inspiring. It's when you hear about filmmakers like Roger Corman, who just passed away, and how he made a bajillion movies on no budget, and was just kind of attitude and scrappiness and a little bit of engineering knowledge and so forth. And it's like that, but an entire industries that were like that.
Let's talk about Dracula. I think we stole Dracula from another part of the world, and yet here is Istanbul, who stole our version of Dracula.
Oh my gosh, that one is a story all its own. Yes, there is a Turkish film called Dracula in Istanbul, and it's wild. It's from the 1950s. It's one of the earlier Turkish genre films, and it is a remarkably faithful adaptation of Dracula, despite, one, it is set in what was then the modern day, and two, it is not technically based on Dracula. It's based on a book called Kazikla Voyvoda, the Impaler Warlord, which is in fact a pirated version of Dracula. It was by an author and translator named Ali Reza Sefiolu, who took Dracula in the 1920s, translated it, but then rewrote it and abridged it to set it in Istanbul, to have its heroes be veterans of the Turkish Revolution, added all of these sections with nationalism, and was the first text to directly connect Dracula to Vlad the Impaler.
Wow.
And so that became the basis for the film, and it to this day remains one of the most faithful Dracula films.
Rocky Horror Picture Show, I've attended many midnight showings, but in Egypt, did they get to do it that way? Did they embrace it that way?
No, probably not. But
come on.
they and in fact, I don't know that Rocky Horror Picture Show, the original, ever quite. I'm sure it got a release there at some point, but in the 1980s, it got an Egyptian remake, or I would say an unauthorized ripoff, by a filmmaker who was a big fan of the original film. But the thing about Egypt is that you really couldn't show Rocky Horror, because it kind of checks all of the censors' boxes.
Yeah, it does.
So the filmmaker had to kind of rewrite the film, at least the second 2/3 of it, and kind of made it about Dracula, but it still remakes a whole bunch of scenes from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, while at the same time commenting on the state of the Egyptian social structure and the economy.
Wow. While you were doing this project and continue to do your movie research, is there a movie that you hope that somebody, copied? Because I would love to see somebody in a different country redo Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. Because, I grew up loving that movie, but I know it was a B-rated movie. But I know in another country, they would tell a different story.
That is an excellent question. That is kind of an amazing idea. I don't know that you'd end up with like a Turkish kiss or something, but I would totally be fascinated by like another band that's from another country in the same kind of deal. That would be wild. I'm a huge fan of heist movies, so I would love to see an international version of like the Thomas Crown Affair or something. But the thing is that, if you name a popular sort of genre film, there's a very good chance, prior to say like the 90s, there's a pretty good chance that it got a remake somewhere. So you get things like the Italian Warriors or Terminator or Predator. You get Bollywood Harry Potter. You get a Hong Kong RoboCop or a Turkish Exorcist or Indian Godfather. Turkish Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So there's so many out there that might already have a remake.
But I got to tell you, Ed, where I'm guilty with your book is that I'm not reading it in order. I'm going in there as I look at the title and I go right to it. So, and I'm sure I'm not going to be the only one that's going to do that. We're going to points of interest, and then we're going to make our way through the entire book. But we're going to these things that we already know.
That's kind of the way it was intended. Really? Again, it really was. So the book is separated into by genre, yes, and then you've got the films in that genre. So it is absolutely designed so that you do not have to read it cover to cover. If you're interested in just versions of Star Wars, absolutely, you can go read them. Yeah. In some ways, you'll see that it kind of builds on itself, where you'll learn a little bit about an industry in one entry, and then you might learn a little bit more in another, but you can absolutely just jump into a film.
Wow. So let's talk about Lassie. In America, Lassie, A, I was shocked when I learned that Lassie was a female, and B, Lassie is a collie here in the States. What about around the world?
Around the world, she is still a collie. Okay. Lassie got a fairly recent remake in Germany. Really? And that was actually kind of the funny thing about it, is that in Germany and in much of Europe, I think Lassie's very well known. The TV series from the 50s got exported internationally, and so it ended up on television stations all over the world. So became very popular in Germany, and so they decided to do a new Lassie movie based on the original novel. And the problem with casting a Lassie movie in Germany, and when I say casting, I mean finding a dog, is that there were no collies really available for film work because they didn't tend to raise them for that because people associated them too much with Lassie. Mm-hmm. So they had to go elsewhere to find the dogs that they needed for the film.
Oh my God, man, 20 minutes with you is not enough. I could sit down and just share some coffee with you all damn day. Where's a website that people can go to find out more about you, Ed? Because, I mean, they're going to want more after this book.
Sure. Well, you can find me at my website, neonharbor.com, and you can learn about my book, some of the other weird stuff that I've done. And there's also a web series that I did for a little while called Deja Vu, where I look at some of these films. So if you want to see clips,
that's you on Deja Vu.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. That's when I told you I found clips and stuff like that. That's exactly where I got them.
Oh, well, hey. Yep, it's me.
Oh, my God. What a connection. What a small world.
Especially with films like this, I think.
Yes. Wow. You got to come back to this show anytime in the future. I want to talk to you more, Ed.
I would love that.
Excellent. Will you be brilliant today, okay?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Yo, what's going on, guy? How are you doing today?
What's up, Arrow? You have the amazing dynamic radio voice on you.
Well, look at your voice. I mean, look at what you're doing with your voice. You continue to grow forward, sharing your stories and your abilities.
Yeah, it is. That is a lot of truth in that statement right there. That's what I've been doing. And I got to tell you, man, here I am speaking with you, telling you about what's going on in this season of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. And I'm just ready to answer whatever questions you got. I'm just going to shoot from the hip.
I want to talk about the album because this is the first time that you guys have done that. And I want to know what's going to be happening with this. And more importantly, are you going to tour with this album? Because I go down to Atlanta to your music scene. I want you to come to my town so I can share some food with you.
Hey, I love to. I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. This is actually not the first time.
Really?
It's the first time that it actually is being publicized, because I myself started to do a cast album before, and I had already got songs with Scrappy and Rashida and myself and some other cast members. And it was just so much drama going on that whole concept just kind of dissipated. So here it is. It's actually happening right now. I'm trying to figure out how it's going to work out, because I'm going to tell you, man, so many people got so much going on. And then you got people who don't like each other.
Yep.
You got people who don't know each other. You got people who are involved with each other. And I'm just trying to see how we're going to come together and put this album together, because it's getting kind of hectic, man.
Yeah, but isn't that what music is all about? To take that chaos and turn it into something that affects other people?
In some instances, yes. In this one, it's different.
Yeah.
It's different. Different, yeah.
Being on the set of Love and Hip Hop in Atlanta, when you say that there are some people that don't know each other, to me, that's a very dangerous game, because it's that gap that creates assumption. And then all of a sudden, everybody's talking behind everybody else's back.
Yeah, because let's keep it 100, man. If you was having a conversation with somebody let's just say off the record, just you and them, then that is going to be considered an intimate approach, an intimate conversation. And the dynamics of the conversation, the parameters of it, I may allow you to get one off on me. And you may, let me get one off on you too, because it's like, okay, mano a mano. But the minute you add cameras, man, and you know that 20 million people watching, and it's going to be 1,000 memes made of you after this is seen, these conversations are different. Yeah. So we could be cool, but we don't really know each other, because a lot of it's political. We're doing it for the cameras, man. And when I say that, I mean, it's like you trying to act like you're cool with somebody, but you're really not. And that's why y'all see so much drama, because people are hiding behind this veil of production. Yeah. But the truth is, this season, they letting it all out. Production said, nah, no more of that. If you say it, we airing it. We airing it. So you're gonna get a different dynamic than you've ever gotten from the franchise of Love and Hip Hop and Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. Remember, mark my words, I told you this first. People gonna be like, oh, whoa, they really not playing this season.
I would love for the movie company and the TV company to put this inside a movie theater, because I would like to be in a whole room full of people who are yelling at that screen, telling you what you should be doing, and they're not even listening to us, but it's going to affect me.
Well, here's the good thing about it. If you don't ever see that happen, and it happen, if you don't ever catch it in a movie, right? Yep. And it's being able to see this premiere in the theater, everybody and their mama's gonna be on social media talking about what they're dealing with, watching it, and they're gonna be watching everything on a TV show as well. So, I mean, you're gonna be narrating. All right, so I don't know why Young Joc is sitting there looking like that with all them kids, that beautiful ass wife. She should just let him go. Don't have people saying they're talking junk. They're gonna be talking junk.
That's how we're talking at the grocery store. Oh my God, that's because I'll bring subjects up just to get people riled up, just to get them to find out if they really are hooked in with what's going on when it comes to love and hip hop in Atlanta.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you're water cooler conversation, Young Joc. I mean, you really are. You start the conversation on that show, and we take it to our own street.
Yeah, man, it's gonna get interesting, man. It's gonna be a lot of water cooler talking this season. I got some decisions I gotta make, and there's some decisions some of my castmates have made that I do not agree with, and it's some that I prayed for. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think this is turning into something else, much bigger than just the concept of love and hip hop. This is like Love and Hip Hop Atlanta on steroids.
Dude, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. And I'm serious. When you come to Charlotte, we got to get together and we got to have a face-to-face conversation.
I can't wait. Let's go, man. Tell me when. I'll come on up there.
I love it. Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Dude, man. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.